Hello, seekers and friends of Divine Journeys. Welcome back to another episode. This is a part 2 interview with Hillary Kallenberger, an amazing yoga instructor who in the first episode shared a lot of her background, how she started in the yoga world and then became an instructor. And her experience, I think it's absolutely amazing. I want you to be able to have a listen to it if you haven't already. And in this segment, I want to also go a little bit deeper with Hilary as an insider in the yoga world, how that has actually changed and evolved in the US and globally, why yoga is so popular, what is making it so intriguing for anyone. So, Hilary, just a quick recap. How long have you practiced yoga?
I've been practicing yoga, I would say probably about 21 years and teaching for about 20.
And with all of those years and not only practicing yourself and becoming an instructor, talk a little bit about how you've witnessed the evolution of yoga.
It's an interesting question. I would say when I started practicing yoga, it wasn't really that common. I mean, there were a few yoga studios around. I mean, obviously I'd been very active in all kinds of different athletics and sports, and it had, only crossed my path in small ways. And I think that at one time, yoga was kind of a specialized thing where, it was just certain types of people that went to yoga. And now, I mean, it seems like there's some form of, yoga studio almost on every corner and many different styles and many different types and people kind of interpreting it in a lot of different ways. There's a lot of lineages of yoga, a lot of history with yoga, a lot of styles of teaching, a lot of different philosophies of yoga, ways to cue, to align. It's really interesting. It's definitely, there's a wealth out there. Today, it feels like it's almost more uncommon for someone to have never taken a yoga class.
Oh, interesting.
I don't know if you feel that way too. And maybe it's just because the world I'm in, because I'm surrounded, obviously, I'm going to attract people who are more into yoga classes. But now, at one of the studios I teach out of, we see a lot of couples come in. We see husbands and wives. There are a lot more, people bringing their families. It's really interesting. It's not just this disciplined path of a yogi who's, and I think that there's some amazing things in that. And then I think there's also some challenges in that.
Well, I consider yoga a moving meditation. Mm-hmm. And that in the corpse pose, where we're really supposed to soak in all of the yumminess of what we just practiced. And so I think that a lot of people I've noticed actually, a lot of people don't feel comfortable staying in that corpse mode for very long. That pose is like almost like I can't, I got to go somewhere. And so how do you help somebody through that?
Right. Well, and that's what, we've kind of seen is as yoga has become more popular in the West, it is also, which is a great thing because it's more accessible to more people. However, it is also through that process become more diluted. And in some ways it has, sometimes you'll go somewhere and it's really focused on the athleticism, the fitness component, the super, super hot, which isn't a bad thing necessarily, but it's like the mindset of why you're there sometimes gets diluted in the process. And really we're there for the shavasana, in my opinion. We're there for the stillness. We're there for the quieting of the mind. The physical asana is just there to prepare us for the meditation. That's what yoga is to me anyway. And so we do the movement, we do all of these things so that we can sink into that place of stillness and find that connection to ourselves and to whatever, our higher purpose and power is. And so a lot of times this, maybe it's a 60-minute class is all we have. And we'll go to classes where people are trying to get as much in there as possible and burn as many calories and get that good workout in. And then it's kind of like Shavasana comes along and it's like, whoop, and then either it's not provided, the time isn't provided, or people, like you said, don't feel comfortable and they're like, oh, well, I've done what I came for and I don't need to just lay here. I can do that at home. Right. And I think that that's where maybe we get a little diluted into as to why we're there. My intention with every class, and it's not always perfect, and sometimes I run out of time, but I try to always offer at least a 7-minute shavasana at the end of the
Oh.
I feel like from a nervous system standpoint, it takes about that long for your nervous system to actually shift into a parasympathetic state. So I want to allow that time for that to happen, because if I'm leading a class or teaching a group, I want them to get the benefit of what they came for. And even though they might not realize that that's the benefit, that's where the benefit is, right? That's where the nervous system actually changes. That's where the nervous system, when we're in a parasympathetic state, that's where our bodies can heal, where we can really embody, process emotions. That's where things can release, and that's where the healing happens. And, above being a yoga instructor, I mean, I consider myself, in the healing arts, a kind of a medium of healing modalities, so to speak. I wouldn't call myself a healer, but I want to teach people how to heal. I want to share that with them. So that shavasana is so important. And it's kind of like, that's the golden ticket. If you really want to get the benefits of yoga, it's, can you get still? Can you get quiet? Can you allow yourself to surrender into a space and feel safe for 7 minutes? Because that's where it happens.
Oh, I think that's fantastic. I love the 7 minutes. It seems like forever, probably for a lot of us at the end of the class, but so essential, really, to reap the benefits, right? So then, in what ways do you think that yoga, as with your students, how can you help the listeners understand how to navigate the challenges of modern life with stress, anxiety, and work-life balance? I mean, you talked about how it has benefited you from a trauma base, and then that movement into healing. So we've got people who are just go, go, go all the time.
A little bit just about, kind of backing up to my personal journey with yoga. I mean, I fell in love with it right away. I absolutely intuitively knew it was part of who I was and where I was supposed to be, and something I was to give back to the world. And that being said, even after starting yoga, I had a lot happen in my life between 20 years ago and now. What I had that was consistent was my practice. And when I endured X situation, I had my practice. When this happened, I had my practice. It was something for me that I could rely on, that was consistent, that I could stay connected even when I was struggling. It didn't solve my problems. That was my job to do, to work on myself, but it gave me something that was very consistent, where I could show up for myself, where I could build integrity with myself, where I could trust myself that no matter what was going on in my life, whether it was traumatic or joyful, that I could always step onto my mat, and I was going to honor my choice to step onto my mat so that I could be in the best possible position to navigate life. Because we have such a fast-paced life now that we don't take time to just get still. We don't take time to reflect very often. We're always future thinking. We're always thinking about what's next. And that keeps us in that sympathetic state with our nervous system. It keeps us in a fight or flight. And when our bodies physically are in that state, we can't heal. That's where we manifest disease. That's where we have injury. That's where we get sick. That's where the mental illness comes in. I mean, there's so much that is driven by just not having a regulated nervous system. And so if we can at least get on our mat every day and make that happen, we are giving ourselves our best shot at being able to navigate life, which is challenging, and it has its ups and downs, and it always will. So for me, it's kind of like a lifeline. It's kind of like anything else you would do for your body, like drinking water every day.
Right. And with the various poses, there is rhyme and reason to the different positions. Can you talk a little bit about that? So that is, somebody is like, oh, I'm either here for an injury, or I'm just stressed and I need to have some kind of relaxation. So can you talk about the various poses and what they mean?
Depending on what type of class you're going for and maybe what the purpose is behind it. If you're coming to my class, and the way I teach specifically is, I'm going to, again, kind of read the room, kind of assess the energy that's showing up, make a intuitive decision as to what I feel is needed. So for one evening, we might be focusing on hips. We might be focusing on opening our hips, strengthening our hips, working into that area which our hips hold a lot of emotion. I think there was a study at one point in time that said, the first muscle to activate in a car accident are your hip flexors. It's the first thing that tenses up and where we hold some stress. And I think especially as women, there's a lot that happens there. So you might get into a stretch that maybe it's super uncomfortable, or position or pose, or however you want to call it, and you might have an emotional release and you're like, I don't know what's happening, because we're really in the hips. Maybe you come in and we're focusing more on opening up our chest, heart openers. Maybe you come in and you're feeling kind of closed off to the world, closed off to yourself, closed off to love. Whatever might be going on in your life, I can see it sometimes in the physical body. It's the shoulders forward. It's the guarding of the heart. It's I've been hurt. I've been traumatized. I'm scared. So opening up our hearts, finding things like, so-called back bends, or I like to call them heart openers, opening up our shoulders and our chest, different things like that, allows that space to kind of like crack our heart open, which is another place that we can access emotion, another place that we can heal from. So every posture has different elements to it. There's elements of strength in every posture, that we're building the actual physical alignment strength of engaging these muscles and learning how to square our hips and engage our core so that we have better posture, so that our back doesn't hurt. And that's all, part of my teaching as well. But there's also this balance in every shape of kind of a strength and a surrender happening at the same time. There's places where we need to engage, and then there's places where we need to let go. And when we're in the pose, we have to intuitively figure out, what is that? Where am I holding on where I need to be strong? And where am I holding on where I really need to let go and relax? And that's kind of the beauty of each and every shape, in my opinion. You might be, in humble warrior, let's say, you might be rooted down in your legs and squeezing your legs together and finding this deep foundation. But at the same time, you're melting your heart. You're surrendering to grace. You're finding this, this release through the strength. And so it's kind of like in every shape, we can access so many different things depending on what's going on.
Different shapes, different bodies, and not just the strength positions, but yoga is about flexibility, balance, and strength, right? There's a marriage of those three. Am I missing anything?
No, I mean, it's definitely, like we said, just like life, it's definitely a balance, excuse me, of strength and flexibility. And those three words kind of just came together on their own there. But it is, I mean, there's the balance that we have to have where we're navigating things like, you're in tree pose, let's say, and you're wobbly tonight. And that's okay, because sometimes we're wobbly in life, right? Mm-hmm. We're practicing and we're reaffirming and we're showing up. There's this strength that comes with yoga on both a physical, mental, and emotional level, because it's the dedication. It's it's the staying in a shape when you might be uncomfortable and you might want to get out. Can you stay for a couple more breaths? Can you work through whatever emotion's coming up and assess that and be aware of that? And then there's the surrender of being able to really let go and trust yourself and be in the space without, fleeing and going, I got to get out of it. And so, a lot of people on a physical level say, I can't do yoga because I'm not flexible enough. I would say they are the best candidates for yoga on a physical level, because the most challenging physical bodies for me to teach are the bodies that are hypermobile, the bodies that are more flexible, the bodies like I used to have as a ballet dancer, where I could just, bend into my joints and make these beautiful, quote, shapes. I could make the pose, but was I really gaining strength? Was I really helping my body? No, because I was just kind of making a shape. I wasn't learning how to engage. So for the people out there who think I'm not flexible enough for yoga, you're the best candidate out there, because that means you've probably got the strength, and then we can work on the flexibility. It's a lot easier, in my opinion, to go that direction than to pull somebody out of hypermobility and teach someone not to straighten their legs as much, not to lock their elbows out, because it feels so good to drop back into a back bend when your head drops to your heels. You feel glorious and amazing, but what's happening to your spine? versus someone who we have to work from the foundation up and go, all right, we got the strength, so let's just ease into the flexibility of it and let's go slow. And that's why it's practice.
I've seen a lot of flexible people get injured because the engagement isn't there. They just fall into a pose and then they'll end up having really bad hip issues or other injuries because that foundation isn't there for the strength. And even with balance, I want to kind of talk about the balance piece of it too, because, when you talk about pre-pose, the purpose of those balancing positions so that people are also mindful that the right side can be speaking to you and telling you something as versus the left side, right?
Right. So having the awareness of our bodies, and, I bring that up a lot during teaching, and I'll say, we'll do something on one side and then the other. And I'll say, okay, I want you to pause a minute and just see if you notice any difference from your right to your left. And it's not about judgment. It's not about saying this is a good hip and this is a bad hip, but it's about awareness. It's about awareness of our own body so that we can take care of ourselves, so that we can keep ourselves strong, so we continue to do the things that we love for as long as we can in life. And my goal on a physical level as a teacher is that. It is, how can we keep you engaged with life, being as active and as physical and moving in the ways that you love moving, that bring you joy for as long as possible. And that becomes very, very important to understand. And that's why, as a teacher, I'm a big cuer. I cue everything. I don't stop talking very often, teaching or in life, but I'm really detail oriented. I'm like, we're pulling our feet together. We're hugging our right hip back. We're drawing our belly and we're lengthening. We're doing all of these things at the same time. One, because it's creating the physical structure of the body to create the flexibility. Two, it's really hard to think about what you're having for dinner when I'm giving you all these cues. So it helps you become present.
Oh, I always appreciate cues. I feel the cues help for that very reason. Like I want to improve on the alignment, and the alignment, I think, is what helps to propel our practice.
Yeah. And that comes back to, like, I want to teach the students why we're doing what we're doing. Because if they're not invested in their own practice on all the levels, whether it be physical, emotional, mental, spiritual, if they're not invested in the why, they're not going to stay with the practice. They're going to lose interest pretty quickly unless they're coming for, just the physical movement and workout. Maybe they don't care, and that's great. But if you really want to understand, and we really want to connect to our bodies and be able to take care of ourselves, understanding why we're doing what we're doing is so important to me.
That it makes me excited to get back into yoga. I stepped away from yoga for a little bit because I started Pilates, and Pilates has a lot of similar philosophies. And that what I realized, though, it wasn't the same for me, that practice at the end when we talked about Shavasana, but also just a way of honoring ourselves in that moment of the practice was different. I missed that.
Yeah.
And so I feel like sometimes for people, even if you've done yoga for 20 years, to step away from it sometimes can be healthy and to come back into it. Has that ever happened to you where you've just stepped away from yoga for a bit and then returned?
There's very rarely. There's been times in my life, usually due to other circumstances, that I got pulled away from my practice. I really am pretty dedicated to a daily practice, and that sometimes means I just go sit for 15 minutes and breathe, and maybe that's my practice that day. But something that allows me to tap in. But there's been times, like I said, I've had kind of a rocky road at times in my life, and that I got just kind of pulled out of it because I got pulled out of myself. I got wrapped in my trauma. I got wrapped in external things that were going on. And what I noticed about it was that when I step away from my mat, I lose myself. I don't handle life as well. I feel it. I get these old, like, maybe I'm traveling, right, for a couple of days, and it's impossible for me to really carve out the time, or I just don't take the time, I guess I should say, to carve it out. I feel it in my body. I feel more anxious. I feel more irritable. I'm like, like in my physical body. I don't feel good because I am so accustomed to it now. It is such a part of who I am in my life. And that I need that. But that being said, the times that I have had to move away from it for a bit, I certainly have a lot more appreciation and gratitude for it when I come back, because when I step back on the mat during those times, it was like, oh, I've missed you. Here's what I was missing. This is what I needed. So I think that happened a few times kind of early on, again, when things were a little more challenging in my personal life. But nowadays, I don't know that I would ever want to step away from the mat, because I think it would be the same thing as forgetting to eat dinner for me.
Well, it's certainly obvious that it's your life purpose. Hilary, you mentioned that you had learned about different yoga styles. What do you call your yoga style?
Yeah, because, personally and as an instructor, I hate being stuck in a box of any type. But I would say that I definitely teach an alignment-based, heart-centered practice. I am very consistent about providing the appropriate alignment, the cues, creating a safe environment physically and emotionally for people to show up. But I'm also always reminding people to connect back to their hearts, to their knowing. I remind them that I am literally just blessed to be their guide, but they are their own best guru. They are the ones that know what their body needs. I can't be inside their body. I can't know if this feels uncomfortable. And so what I want to do is allow them to really listen to their bodies, their hearts, anything, their intuition, so that they can have the experience that's going to benefit them. And so that's kind of how I would approach, I would say, a group-led class where, I teach out of a couple of studios here in Sarasota, and then I have a couple of small groups that I work with. But then I also have a private practice, and I work with individual clients. And that looks a little different because I do know what their intentions are. We do come in and set these together. And some of these are people that come to me because they need to heal from trauma. And so we're working with the body in a very different way. We're using some yoga, but we're also using different types of embodiment practices and movement therapy. I'm a Thai practitioner, so sometimes that involves hands-on touch, where I feel like this client needs connection. They need my hands on them for where they need to heal. Sometimes because of my mental health, I was a licensed professional counselor for many years. Sometimes there's a little more talk therapy involved, and there's a little more goal setting, and we're workshopping it a little bit more as we're doing these things. So, and then I work with the nervous system first and foremost to teach people how to regulate their nervous system. And then from there, we can kind of see what works for you. Is it meditation? Is it a restorative practice? Do you need to move more energy and get into a, more, quote, athletic type of movement, more powerful movement, maybe I should say. So it's so individual when it comes to that versus, we talked earlier about the group setting, and we're kind of teaching to everybody versus tailoring it to what I feel someone needs. And I have the gift of having a very intuitive sense of understanding the patterns of people's bodies. I can see them, I can sense them, and I kind of just already know, like, this is what we need to do today, even if they don't really understand why.
And I think the one-on-one with you is wonderful for people who might just be intimidated to go into the class environment initially and just want to be able to get some basics and just progress one-on-one initially. Yeah. So how can people find you to learn how to work with you?
So I have a website. It's very basic, but it gives you your basic info on me. It's www.currentmanifestationssrq.com. I teach most of my classes, and my office space is housed at Get Bent Yoga Studio, which is in South Sarasota. That's where I do a lot of privates. I have an office space in the back where I work with most of my clients one-on-one. And then I also do kind of out in the community work. I do some home visits and things like that. But basically, if you go to my website, there's a contact me button, I think, that goes straight to my email. And then you can also find me on Instagram with my funny handle. It's at hotyogamama75. But that's where I kind of put a little bit more of, my creative outlet. But you can find me that way too.
Great, Hilary. We are going to definitely also include your contact information in the links for these episodes. And so as we conclude this interview, Hilary, what message or piece of wisdom would you like to share with our listeners who may be on their own divine journeys, both on and off the yoga mat?
Oh, gosh, there's so many little nuggets of wisdom in there. All of the answers that we are looking for, we have within us. And when we can trust ourselves and take the time to listen, we can become the most powerful creators of our own life experience.
That's juicy. Hilary, thank you so much for joining me with this wonderful insight into the yoga world and what you're doing to create your own practice and sharing that with others. Hillary Kallenberger, thank you so much for being a guest on Divine Journeys. It has been an absolute pleasure, and look forward to seeing you on the yoga mat one of these days.
Thank you. So grateful to be here and share this space with you. I really appreciate it.
Thank you all for joining us. Do come back, subscribe, make sure to hit the like button. Please do leave a comment. And until next time, namaste. Spread the love and be sure to hit the like button, subscribe, and share the channel with fellow journeyers. The positive vibes will come back to you in abundance. And be sure to join the Divine Journeys Community Facebook group to connect with like-minded seekers. Namaste, my friends.